Good evening, everyone. Welcome. For those of you that won't know me, I'm Steve Smith. I'm Vice-Chancellor of the University of Exeter, and it's absolutely fabulous to see you all here this evening. And can I immediately, of course, thank our speaker and alum, Hugo Tagholm, Chief Executive of Surfers Against Sewage, for agreeing to deliver what is the inaugural event in the Exeter Lectures series. I must confess that I approached tonight with a little trepidation when I saw from the original diary entry in my diary that Hugo was from SAS. This worried me slightly, but now I realise it's Surfers Against Sewage. It's not about the Special Air Service, or although it might be, I don't know, I could be wrong. I'll introduce Hugo properly in a moment or two, but let me just say a few words about the Exeter Lectures series. These lectures, which we've launched in this, our Diamond Jubilee year, are free public events which provide a forum for distinguished speakers from academia, from business, from the arts and civil society to visit the university and share their thoughts and ideas on major public issues which shape our lives. The idea, of course, is through this series of lectures, we hope to engage our communities on a range of topics relating to issues that society faces today. We'll be talking in the next couple of years on topics as wide apart as global conflict, food security, climate change, mental health. We've spent the last 6 decades growing our research in order to address these most pressing world problems and enhance our understanding of the impact of that research. So we hope that these lectures will explore further some of the global problems the world faces by encouraging discussions and engagement with you, our audience. You never know, tonight we might come up with a solution that no one else has thought of. I'm allowed one quick plug. That quick plug is for our next event. I'm very pleased to announce that on the 2nd of November in Exeter, for the second of the lectures, we'll be welcoming Simon Stevens, Chief Executive of the NHS. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce Hugo Tagholm. Hugo became Chief Executive at Surfers Against Sewage in 2008 and has overseen a sustained period of development, growth and impact for the organisation, which has established its position as one of the UK's most effective marine conservation charities. He's overseen the transition of the organisation from a single issue campaign group to a national environmental charity with extensive national and international influence. And it's the evolution of SAS that he's come to talk to us about tonight. He first got involved with the organisation in 1991 when he joined the bodyboard division of an SAS surf competition before then becoming a campaigner and trustee 10 years later. Hugo was brought up in North London, studied French and philosophy at Exeter University, followed by ecology and conservation at Birkbeck University. He's developed a high public profile and has worked at a senior level with many different charities, including the Climate Coalition and the Wildlife Trusts. For a number of years, he's also worked alongside former Prime Minister's wife, Sarah Brown, helping develop her charity, Piggy Bank Kids, set up to help save the lives of premature babies and create opportunities for underprivileged young people. He's also a member of the Vision Council for World Surfing Reserves and is a former trustee and chair of the Museum of British Surfing. So, may I say once again, thank you, Hugo, for being here this evening. It's fantastic to welcome you back to the Exeter family. So without further delay, let me hand over to our speaker this evening, Hugo Tagholm. Hugo.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Hugo Tagholm, and I'd first of all like to thank Exeter University for inviting me here this evening to give the inaugural Jubilee lecture. It's a great honour and a privilege, and I hope that my story does it justice. Just a bit about me. I'm a dad, I'm an environmentalist, and I am a charity professional. And yes, I am a surfer too, although no one would ever pay me to do my surfing. And I think my trustees would be concerned if I did surfing as part of my day job. I've been working in the charity sector for some 15 years with the Climate Coalition, a coalition of all of the biggest NGOs working to combat the climate change issue. And as Steve said, I worked with Sarah Brown for 5 years at her children's charity Piggy Bank Kids, looking at working on projects to support opportunities for young children and to prevent premature births. But I'm now very lucky to run an organisation that has inspired me for many years, and one that fuses my passions for the ocean, for the environment, and for riding waves. And as Steve said, it's an organisation that I got involved with as a young surfer back in 1991. And my journey with the charity has seen me go from a participant in a bodyboard competition to a campaigner, to an activist, to a regional rep, then a trustee. And in 2008, I took over as chief executive, which was a great honour to me. But it was at this surf competition in Polzeath, just up the coast in Cornwall, that I first got involved. And I was first introduced to some of the founding members of Surfers Against Sewage. It was a competition called Surf to Save, which sponsored a number of environmental charities, or supported a number of environmental charities, including Greenpeace and Surfers Against Sewage. I was very proud to make it through to the semi-finals of that competition. I don't tell many people that it only started in the quarterfinals. But more importantly, it was there that I met some of the founding members of Surfers Against Sewage, and my journey began with the organisation. But a lot has changed since then, not least my hairline. This is me on the left, the year before I started my journey, so you can see a lot has changed. I thought I was a bit of a hotshot bodyboarder. That was out in France just before I came back to do that competition that started my journey. But for those of you that don't know, Surfers Against Sewage is today a marine conservation charity that protects waves, oceans and beaches for all to enjoy safely and sustainably. And we aim to create measurable improvements in the state of our coastline through positive changes in public behaviour, in government legislation and in industry practices. Our work takes a top-down and a bottom-up approach, engaging, inspiring and mobilising grassroots communities nationwide, and influencing industry wherever we can, and calling on government to change policy to help protect our coastline around the UK. And we've got a UK-wide remit, and our environmental initiatives focus not just on sewage, but on protecting the coastline from 4 key threats. Marine litter is probably the top threat and the one that the public is most interested to work on with us. Water pollution, so the continued pollution of our ocean from sewage and diffuse pollution. Climate change, which of course is a huge global threat, and the oceans were front and centre at the COP21 talks in Paris at the end of last year. And of course coastal development. As our population grows and we see more and more pressure on our spaces, the coastline is under pressure. We're here to safeguard SSSIs, sites of special surfing interest, as we call them, or surfing habitats. 2015 was our 25th anniversary, and it really gave us the chance to celebrate the evolution of Surfers Against Sewage into a fully fledged environmental charity, working on marine conservation issues that are perhaps more complex and urgent than ever before. We've now become one of the biggest enviro surf groups in the world, second only perhaps to the Surfrider Foundation in the United States. But one of the big strategic things that I did when I came in 2008 was call for charitable status for the organisation, which has been a huge catalyst for the growth of the organisation over the last few years. It means we can fundraise more effectively, reach more people, have more transparency to give people the confidence to work with us, and work on bigger projects than ever before. So we're regulated by the Charity Commission now. I've got 11 voluntary trustees, oceanographers, marine scientists, PR experts, legal experts who help us shape the very strongest possible organisation for today's challenges. And I've got an inspirational and fantastic team of 10 members of staff, 11 including myself. So that's grown from just 3 when I started back in 2008. And they're campaigners, they're fundraisers, they're membership managers, they're communicators, they're people who can inspire the public to work with us. And they in turn help us manage 75 regional reps right around the UK. People from the tip of Scotland right down to Land's End who lead strong and engaged communities, running local campaigns, engaging with national campaigns and helping be our eyes and ears on the ground at beaches that we can't reach ourselves. And they bring with us 15,000 community volunteers to the beachfront every year. That contributes 50,000 hours of volunteering time directly to the front line of the issues that we care on marine litter, on monitoring sewage discharges from combined sewer overflows, on all sorts of things that people care about in their communities. The beaches are hugely important to coastal communities right around the country. And many of you will know that we're a membership organisation. We've got about 10,000 members around the country. And that membership gives us the lifeblood to do what we do. It gives us an independence of voice. It gives us the unrestricted income to be able to call on changes in industry practices, to call for better legislation and inspire the positive change we want to see for our beaches around the country. And we estimate now that we've got about 150,000 regular supporters, people who engage with us through our petitions, through our campaign actions, through outside events, people who are regularly in touch with us. And that really creates a powerful voice, which leads in combination with the issues we work on to millions of media impressions for marine litter stories we have, for initiatives we have to tackle water pollution. You name it, the media interested in working with Surfers Against Sewage on the issues we care about. And 3 words sum up our mission nicely today. And they're probably not Surfers Against Sewage anymore. It's somewhat of a misnomer these days. It pigeonholes us on the issues of the 1990s. But environment, waves, and community sum us up nicely. But despite the fact we've evolved, SAS is built on an amazing history and a track record of success, which has always been inspired by people taking action to protect the spaces that they love. It was started some 25 years ago in May 1990 by a group of passionate Cornish surfers in the north coast villages of St Agnes and Porthowan. We're still based in St Agnes today. These were surfers with a strong and direct motivation to tackle the pollution that they were experiencing firsthand while surfing. They were literally sick of getting sick when they were going in the water. Sewage pollution was a chronic issue at the time, much like the marine litter issue is today. And UK surfers were at the front line. And there was a very clear modus operandi in those days. As the cover of the first ever issue of Pipeline attests, Surfers Against Sewage was set up as a single issue pressure group to tackle marine sewage disposal. And the first issue of Pipeline also highlighted the most likely key to success for the organisation: publicity stunts. The visibility of the sewage issue at the time and the direct impact on a vocal, media-friendly minority was a potent cocktail to make news headlines with an irrefutable campaign argument. But the tide had really started to turn on the need to drastically improve bathing water quality with the privatisation of the English water companies in 1989. This change, coupled with 2 key pieces of European legislation, gave a framework for protecting our beaches from sewage pollution, including new obligations and timescales to install full sewage treatment works around the country. And these key pieces of legislation were the EU Bathing Water Directive and, probably most importantly, the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive in 1991, which was the real game changer. So SAS acted as a very effective catalyst for change, pressing on these key pieces of legislation, collating health evidence and connecting previously disparate groups of surfers into what became one of the best recognised environmental campaign movements of the 1990s. And this is all particularly relevant as we approach the EU referendum on the 23rd of June, which presents the country with one of its biggest political decisions it's ever had to take. So much of our most powerful environmental protection has come from EU directives over the past 25 years, many of which SAS sets its environmental initiatives against, not least the current Marine Strategy Framework Directive and the imminent Circular Economy Directive, which could be critical in helping us tackle the growing marine litter issue. So it's vitally important that whatever decision is taken by the nation in June, that our politicians ensure that our wild, blue spaces continue to be protected in as strong a fashion as we have at the moment. But issues, campaigns, tactics, and times change. So whilst we retain the hard-hitting tactics of the 1990s and a distinct identity, we've had to evolve to take on new issues, adapt to new technology, bearing in mind there was no internet, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram, there was none of that in 1990. We just had pipeline news to communicate with people. I'd love it to be like that today. I'd have more time on my hands. But one of our key strengths, one of the key strengths of the organisation is our supporters, and we've always had supporters with a difference. They're people who are not just passive observers of the sea. They're individuals who live and breathe the sea, and more often than not find themselves immersed in the ocean. And so close is their relationship with the sea that we've often described them as marine indicator species. They share our unique natural spaces with marine flora and fauna, our dolphins, our basking sharks, our seals, our birds. And they're exposed to the environmental issues firsthand, walking across marine litter-strewn beaches, surfing at the mouths of sewer overflows, and acutely sensitive to the environmental changes and developments at their favourite beaches. Local marine habitats, wildlife, fish stocks, surfing waves, coastal economies all need protecting, and our supporters can perhaps sometimes see this the most vividly. And this is non-stop work. As has often been said, the environment is never saved. It's always in the process of being saved. Now, water quality is perhaps the campaign that SAS is best recognised for. After all, our name says it all, and the issue is in the organisation's DNA. And it's a huge part of our history, and it continues to be a big issue that we're working on. So thanks to better legislation and some effective SAS campaigning, water quality has improved dramatically over the past 25 years. And gone, certainly in England and Wales, are the continuous discharges of raw sewage into our oceans. However, there's still a significant impact on our water from sewage and diffuse pollution. You might be surprised to know that there's a network of over 30,000 sewer overflows that impact our rivers and our beaches nationwide. And until recently, the most dangerous of these discharged without warning, reducing water quality at some of the nation's favourite beaches and bathing waters, and threatening the health of bathers, surfers, and water users alike. Surfers Against Sewage's real-time water quality app, the Safer Sea Service, monitors these discharges today and issues free warnings to water users. Last year, we tracked over 4,000 separate pollution incidents at our beaches. This equated to hundreds of thousands of alerts being sent to over 20,000 subscribers to this service. Legislation, water quality testing programs, and the recognition of how, when and where people use the sea don't necessarily keep pace with the rapidly evolving surfing and water sports sector. The burgeoning cold water surfing scene and community of an estimated 600,000 UK surfers mean that more and more people are stepping back into the front line of sewage pollution. So, what are we doing about this? Well, the big national campaign is more difficult these days because there's not such a big sweeping piece of legislation that will suddenly eradicate sewage forever. But there are many parts to our campaign. We've got a big part of the campaign at the moment, our Sewage Free Seas campaign, which we're taking to Parliament next week, which is calling for heavy restrictions on combined sewer overflows. But the calls we're making moving forward are mandatory real-time alerts for all sewer overflows that impact spaces that people use. This is common sense public health information. If you go to a beach where there could be sewage, you need to be warned about that. If your children are playing in a river where there could be sewage, you need to be warned when that sewage goes in. If you're surfing, swimming, using the sea in any way, this is vitally important information. We want to see an extension of the bathing season. It's currently just May through to September. But we know that many, many people are using the sea all year round, and certainly on the shoulders of the season. In March and April, in October and November, we see hundreds, thousands of people in the water on any given day. So we're calling for a minimum extension of at least Easter to October. This will protect people in a bigger, better way. The bathing season is when the Environment Agency has to test water quality and make sure it's up to scratch. The bathing season is when we have the infrastructure at the beach to protect people, to keep them safe at the beach. We also want to see a review of bathing water testing spots. Sometimes we find at a beach that the bathing zone where the water is tested is some way down the beach, far away from the point source of pollution. But yet we'll still have hundreds of people using the sea regularly right where the sewage or the pollution, the diffuse pollution, goes into the sea. And we believe that the people most at risk, not least at risk, should be protected. We'd like to see water companies investing to address the most problematic CSOs, where we know there are impacts on sites of special surfing interest, where we know recreational areas are being damaged, these blue spaces that are important for healthy communities, healthy lifestyles, and healthy environments. And most importantly, we're backing all of this up with science, and it's been great to work with the European Centre for the Environment and Human Health recently. We've worked on 2 key health studies with water users, reaching out to our members over the past 18 months. And this provides the science for us to make these calls. And one of these, our beach bum survey, which is probably the most publicised survey we've ever done, was looking at the emerging threat of antibiotic-resistant bacteria and the possible link to sewage and diffuse pollution and the impacts on surfers and bathers alike. This is compelling science that can help support our calls for cleaner, safer oceans for everyone. In 2013, we launched another campaign to specifically talk about sites of special surfing interest, the Protect Our Waves campaign, which encapsulated all of our calls around marine litter, around water quality, and the development of spaces that we want to see protected. And we managed to get 55,000 people to sign this petition, the biggest ever EnviroSurf petition in history. Small compared to lots of other petitions, but powerful for us, powerful for a small organisation. And we delivered that to number 10 Downing Street with the support of musician Ben Howard. It put SAS campaigners outside Downing Street for the very first time. And it received support from all sorts of people that transcended the surfing sector. Musicians, people like Jack Johnson, Gabrielle Aplin, sports stars in the surfing sector, Ben Fogle, all sorts of great people supported this petition. And what were we calling for? We were calling for greater protection. How were we going to do that? Well, it's led to the formation of our own all-party parliamentary group, which is quite something for a small organisation that has emerged out of Cornwall. So we've got 25 MPs, a big membership for an all-party parliamentary group. MPs representing coastal constituencies right around the country, chaired by one of our local MPs from Cornwall here, Steve Double MP, who's the MP for St Austell and Newquay. And we can bring them together 3 or 4 times a year to discuss the issues that we're working on, to discuss the solutions, to hold regulators to account, to bring businesses before the group. And that's exactly what we're doing next week. We're bringing the Environment Agency together. We're bringing health experts together. Will Gaze here from the European Centre for the Environment and Human Health, and various other stakeholders to talk about why we need to protect our coastline. But marine litter is without a doubt at the top of agenda for our members. Now, these 2 images are interesting. We launched this image of the marine litter surfer with our pro bono ad agency, M&C Saatchi, in 2010. And I took a bit of flack myself for this image. People said, oh, it's never that much litter on the beach. It would never happen like that. And I agree with that. You're never going to walk out of the sea with that much litter on you. But Just a couple of years later, well, it was just after the 2013 winter storms, we saw scenes like this. This is Penhale Beach, part of Perranporth Beach, one of my favourite surf spots. And it was knee-deep with litter in some places. I took my team down there at lunchtime on this day, and we collected 1,000 plastic water bottles in just an hour. So you can see the scale of the marine litter crisis. And it's now affected every part of our ocean. It affects all beaches. You can't go to a beach anywhere around the UK and not find some sort of plastic pollution. And I've surfed at this beach and seen dolphins. I've seen seals around this beach. I've seen gannets, all sorts of great animals, basking sharks. And I also sadly see entanglements at this beach. Animals trapped in ghost gear, old fishing netting that's been washed off boats, that's been inadvertently discarded in the sea. And this reflects the international figures. Over 1 million seabirds and 100,000 marine mammals die each and every year through ingestion and entanglement in marine litter. And recent surveys show that marine litter is continuously on the rise, and it's now at its highest level ever. So what are we going to do about this? Well, we can work with everyone to make a change. And beach cleans are one of the things that we've started to do more of over the past few years. When I started in 2008, we worked with about 500 volunteers every year at the beachfront. This year, as I've said, we've dramatically upscaled our beach clean efforts now, and we'll be working with 15,000 people right around the coastline. This is great for the communities we work with. It gives them a tangible way of protecting the space that they love, of coming together with like-minded people to make a difference. But it's also a great promotional vehicle to show what the community cares about. It gets the attention of MPs, and we often have MPs going along to these events. It gets the attention of local businesses. They come and support these events. They might fund some of these events. And so it's a real eye-opener for everyone. But it's not the only solution, and it's not the ultimate solution. It's just part of the solution. We've also got to look at what's beyond beach cleans. And we want to rid our beaches of marine litter, of course, by removing it with beach cleans and community activities, by intercepting it, by introducing more recycling efforts and calling for specific bans at beaches or systems to be put in place to prevent the flow of litter onto our beaches. Now, here are some good examples. This is a campaign action we had at one of the party conferences up in Birmingham, I believe. This is Zach Goldsmith, previous mayoral candidate. And we had the Break the Bag Habit Coalition. And this was working with Keep Britain Tidy, the Campaign to Protect Rural England, and the Marine Conservation Society. And it helped introduce the 5p plastic bag charge. And now this has been very effective. Early reports are already showing that the major supermarkets are showing an 80% reduction in the circulation of plastic bags in the supermarkets. Literally overnight, I remember going to the supermarket the day after the legislation came into force. And people were there. It was almost an excitement. People had their reusable bags. They didn't take a plastic bag to take their, can of shaving cream or their single drink that they would normally have taken before. They just decided to use their hands or use what they had at home. So it's making a big difference. And we're seeing the statistics come out at the beachfront. Our volunteers at our Big Spring Beach Clean just a couple of months ago came to us and said, we're finding far fewer plastic bags on the beach. I was talking to someone from the Marine Conservation Society just a couple of days ago, and their volunteers were saying the same. So these are effective measures to stop the flow of litter to the beach. And we're going to be doing more on this. We're going to be calling for deposit returns on plastic bottles. Now, some of you might recognise this. This is a vanish bottle that actually didn't vanish. It washed up on the beach in Cornwall because a big container went down off Land's End and 20,000 bottles leaked out into the environment, and they washed up in January. So we mobilised alongside other organisations, the National Trust, Marine Conservation Society and others. We mobilised our volunteers and we collected thousands. Now, a deposit scheme might not stop that sort of incident. That would be better shipping legislation. But plastic bottles are one of the most prevalent items we find on our beaches. Now, in countries where they have deposit schemes, we see a 90 or 95% recycling or collection rate of plastic bottles. Here, we see a 30 to 40% collection rate. So we would strongly endorse a deposit scheme coming into force, and we'll be doing much more work on that here in the UK later this year. I sometimes visit the States to work with the Surfrider Foundation, which is a great privilege. But on the beaches there, you don't see any plastic bottles because there's a value to those. 25 cents per bottle, you take it back and you claim that value. I remember it from my childhood with R. White's lemonade bottles. You'd never chuck one away because you'd take it back to get the 20p back. My granddad taught me that. So we'd like to see these things coming back in, and they can be very effective. And certainly I know my son Darwin would scamper around to find bottles if he knew he could make a bit of money from taking them back. But we also want to see plastics designed out of products, single-use plastics that have no place in the products they're used for. And this is just a few cotton bud sticks that were found at our Big Spring Beach Clean. And we find thousands of them around the coastline. And they're made out of plastic, and they find their way through the sewage system because people throw them into the toilet, sometimes deliberately, maybe sometimes accidentally. And they find their way through the sewage system. And clearly there's a design flaw in that because those single-use items used for just a few seconds to remove some makeup or remove your earwax then last for hundreds of years in the marine environment, potentially becoming more toxic, potentially harming wildlife, and potentially entering the food chain and harming us eventually. So it's really important that we look at where we can use design of products to stop the impacts on our coastline. And we encapsulated all of this in our marine litter report in 2014, which we presented to DEFRA Minister George Eustace at the time as part of our all-party parliamentary group. And our marine litter report calls for a 50% reduction in UK beach litter by 2020. And this was published in line with the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, the key piece of European legislation of the moment that can help control marine litter. And it calls for new measures at individual and community level, beach cleans, more awareness, more education. It calls for more industry action and for new government legislation. We want to stop marine litter at source, to stop it from entering the marine environment in the first place, where it can cause harm. We want to create a circular economy through extended producer responsibility, like deposit return schemes, and greater corporate accountability. We'd like to see new legislation potentially introduced to control things like cigarette butt litter at beaches. Smoking bans might be an effective way of stopping thousands of very harmful cigarette butts from entering the marine environment. And of course, we want to dramatically upscale the community action with volunteering opportunities such as beach cleans. Now, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, as I say, is the key piece of legislation. And we believe we already know what's at our beaches. We see cans, bottles, cotton bud sticks, cigarette butts, mermaids' tears, all sorts of different things. But we see them very regularly. But what we need is science and evidence to support this. So we're looking at more and more programs with citizen science, the buzzword of our sector, to actually monitor and evaluate what we're finding at the beach, to support our calls moving forward, to submit a new data set to the government, to Europe, to help inform the actions and measures that can make a real difference at the coastline. We need to close the loop on litter. Now, I've talked a little bit about our all-party parliamentary group, but Westminster has always been hugely important to Surfers Against Sewage. It was my predecessor, Chris Hines, and I see the photographer who was with him, Andy Hughes, back in 1991, who first took the sandy footprints of surfers into the corridors of power in Westminster. But it's a place that we still are very active. This was a climate change action at the beginning of 2015 as part of the Stop Climate Chaos Coalition. And we're often put front and centre because of the power of maybe the communication that surfboards, wetsuits, and the connection with the environment has. I was up in London just 2 days ago with DEFRA ministers talking about a new national marine litter strategy, which we've been invited to contribute to and to look at the source to sea effect of marine litter. It's where we can create much more positive change much more quickly. I referenced the plastic bag charge earlier. Now this has shown the impact of how powerful legislation, simple legislation, with a relatively low financial intervention can create real and lasting change. But it's not just national impact we have anymore. We have international reach. And it's some of those platforms that I talked about earlier, the Facebook, the Instagram, the Twitter, the digital world that we live in, means that it's almost ludicrous to think that our advocacy, our work, stops at our border. Last year, we were delighted to host the Global Wave Conference, bringing together our counterparts from right around the world, the Surfrider Foundation, the Save the Waves Coalition, Wild Coast, but also organisations and individuals and experts that transcended the surfing sector. The National Trust worked with us. We had Matt White from the European Centre for the Environment and Human Health. We had Professor Richard Thompson, the preeminent scientist working from Plymouth University on marine plastics. We had Lucy Siegel, the environmental editor of the Observer and the Guardian. So it brought together a powerful group of people. 2 days in Cornwall at the Bedruthen Steps Hotel up the coastline here, and then a day in Parliament with Steve Double chairing a reception or hosting a reception with us. And it was a fantastic moment that saw professional surfers, some of the best surfers in the world, come together with some of the best scientists in the world to debate sites of special surfing interest and the protection of our beaches moving forward. So we're delighted to see the international reach we today have. And we're also delighted to be recognised by royalty. Last year we were asked by Clarence House to host an event at Fistral Beach, bringing together all of the big NGOs working on marine litter at the grassroots level, but also at the legislative level. It was a great honour to spend an hour escorting His Royal Highness Prince Charles around the beach, introducing him to local businesses, national charities, and councillors and MPs. It was a bit nerve-wracking, if I'm honest. But it was a testament, not to my work as Chief Executive of Surfers Against Sewage, but it was really a testament to our partners, to our volunteers, to our regional reps, to the network that we've managed to create around the UK to work on the issues with us. And it was great to see it influencing hearts and minds at such a high level. We live in a truly inspiring part, or we're based in a truly inspiring part of the country, and I'm very proud to see the positive reach and impact that Surfers Against Sewage is today having. And of course, it's inspired me as an individual since 1991. And so just to finish, whilst the issues our environment face at times may seem huge, I think it's important that we all have the courage to try and create positive change, even if we don't end up seeing the final results in our lifetime. We can all be more mindful and active to protect the world around us. So thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. We've got, of course, an audience back in Exeter, so I'm going to come to questions, and I'll take questions here, and then you'll understand that I'll flip to Exeter. That does mean that we need a microphone to travel around, because otherwise the people there won't hear the questions. They'll hear the answers, but not the questions. So we could play an interesting game, but we're not going to. We will take questions, and if you could just say who you are and what you want to ask. So who'd like to start with a question here? There's a question in the front here, if we can move there.
Thank you very much, Hugo, for an inspiring story there. I'm Matthew from 15 Court, Matthew Thompson. Do you think there's something specific about the psychology of surfing that lends itself to this type of transformation that you described? Because obviously you've achieved some environmental transformation, but also community transformation. Is there something very specific about the psychology, I suppose the mental aspects of what you do on the wave that lends itself particularly to this work?
I think we're very lucky as an organisation to have surfing as a tool to communicate in the sector that we work in. I think actually, strangely speaking, surfing fundamentally is quite a selfish sport where people want to go and find a wave, generally by themselves or with as few people as possible, and it tends to be about the individual experience. But the shared experience really is around the ocean environment. What we see with our supporters is people being inspired not just by riding waves, but by the beach environment, by walking their dog on the beach, by the interaction with nature. In a way, I see, and this probably this is definitely not my original thinking, but the beach is one of the great sort of last unifiers in the wild space. Even the countryside seems to be more daunting. You're not quite sure where you can ramble and what you can do. But the beach really brings people together and sort of strips away class, strips away culture, and is something for everyone. You can go and explore over rocks, you can delve into nature, you can interact with gobies and crabs. And I think it's that sort of visceral, tangible connection with the sea that drives people to come to us. And I've got to say that the growth that we've got has been thanks to a great team, some great trustees, and really focusing in on creating sort of great products to work with our members with. So we've got passionate volunteers, we try and create fun events, we try and communicate in a different way. I've sort of got a little bit of a phobia of the sort of dusty old charity sector image, and actually we want to do things really well, we want to do them really fun, we want to create opportunities, we want to bring people together. So in a way I see Surfers Against Sewage not just as environmental charity, but something for people.
I'll just see is there a question from Exeter? Yes, there is a question from Exeter. Can we get a mic? Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm James from Exeter. Firstly, yeah, I think SAS is a wonderful organisation. Maybe that's just a bit of a pretext because I think my question's maybe a little bit negative. Do you think that organisations such as yours show that perhaps we have to wait for symptoms to be felt by individuals before action's taken to address environmental issues? If so, what hope is there for more environmental issues that perhaps aren't felt by surfers or other interest groups?
Actually, I think it's a very good question, and this is a great example. This pink plastic bottle that washed up in January because lots of people responded to the pink tide that happened, but it was only just a fraction of the bottles that wash up anyway. Just so happens that the other bottles are clear and less visible, and so this was one of those things. I think it is challenging. I think referring to sort of my last sort of comment, really, it's important that we remain positive because we've got sort of one opportunity as people on the planet to try and create positive change. And actually, you don't have to go dark green. You don't have to totally alter your life, but you should try and do something and think about the impacts you're having on this planet and the positive things that you can do. So yeah, there is a challenge with issues that aren't visible to people. I think, in some ways, climate change shows that because it isn't that real for people in some ways. Not everyone sees the glaciers melting. They don't feel it in their day-to-day lives. They don't feel any different. So why should they turn down the central heating? Why should they not take the short hop flight to Copenhagen for the weekend? So yeah.
Thanks. Next question here. There's a question halfway up.
Thank you. John Hislop, I'm one of your 50,000 volunteers on the beach team. Certainly was last year. Chicken and egg question. You've been successful because you've policed the legislation. Are you able to actually, de novo, create legislation, do you think, to protect the environment? How are you active in that area?
It's a good question. We're more active than ever through the all-party parliamentary group, so it gives us that opportunity for the first time. We've only had it since, we launched it at the end of sort of 2014 with the Marine Litter report. It meant that we could feed in our hopes for the solutions to the marine litter crisis directly to the government. We have seen a good example of where we have created legislation with the 5p plastic bag charge. So we were working in collaboration with 4 or 5 other charities, so it wasn't just us, but it's a proven route to success. So we have done it, so it hasn't just been policing legislation, although it is our main way of creating change, because there's obviously a movable feast within any bit of legislation, particularly the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. Sadly, that is not as strong as the water quality legislation was back in 1990, particularly 1991. We'd love it to say and set specific targets of reduction, specific obligations for big companies to take back their waste, to recycle that waste, to reuse that waste. It shouldn't even be called waste. It's a resource. We can't afford to throw it away. But you're right, it's one of the big challenges and one that we're learning about all of the time. I'm very proud of where we've got to with our political engagement. We're talking to more politicians than ever. It's great that we've been invited to talk about marine litter and the national litter strategy with the government, with DEFRA, to inform that. So we're on a journey, but we're always looking at ways we can create legislation. And the All-Party Parliamentary Group will be a good vehicle for helping us take that journey to the next stage.
The 5p charge taught me one amazing fact, which is the hardwired nature of forgetting to take the bags with me is so strong that you turn around and drive back. I mean, it's how ingrained it was just to take them because they were, free. But I thought that was a great piece of legislation. Next question here. I'll go to Exeter in a minute, but next question here.
Hello, my name's Brendan and I'm part of a family member of SAS. And I wanted to ask, you've done a great job of going from 3 to 11. And is 11 big enough for you to achieve your mission? And if not, how are you going to do your biggering?
Is 11 big enough? No, 11's not big enough to achieve the mission, but I don't know if we achieve the mission by growing too much further. Certainly, the more we grow, the less sleep I get in many ways, with the worry of sustaining it all as a small business, but a growing business. So I'm always conscious of the sustainability, not just of our environment, but of the organisation. I think collaboration is key, and we're delighted. As I said in the talk, citizen science is one of the buzzwords in our sector, and I think we've shown with our collaboration with Exeter University, with the European Centre for the Environment and Human Health, that there's a great partnership there. And we want to work with more people, so we're not outsourcing, but we're collaborating. We're looking for the resources up front that can fulfill the missions of both partners or a number of partners. I know we need more people than 11. One of the common things we get with any external meetings, any external people who come into the office, they say, is this all you are? Because we do have quite a big visibility out there. And I field endless calls of people phoning up saying, can you put me through to your press department? I'm like, press department? We do it all ourselves. So we're quite lean as an organisation for the impact I feel that we create. We're not cash rich. We've grown and we've done lots, but we take on a lot and we multitask, which is good to a point. I don't want to burn my team out because I'm conscious that we can't work all hours of the day. We need a balanced lifestyle. But I think I'd like to see it grow more, 15, 20, but I don't want to get massive. I don't want to be too far removed from the front line of what we do. I like the connectivity. I like the scale of what we do at the moment. But we'll see.
Thank you. Thanks. Is there another question from Exeter? Yes? Hello?
My name is Andy Brown.
Oh, hi, Andy.
I work on literary issues relating to sewage from the Victorian period through to the present. And but you gave us a really good summary of things to do, recycling, bans on microbeads, the 5p plastic bag charge and so on, all of which are to do with beach litter. But can I press you a little bit more on what the work that you're doing with sewage itself? What kinds of practical changes are happening? In London we've got a massive super sewer stopping, hopefully, accidental discharges into
into the estuary and the lower reaches. But are there other things that you're working on specifically relating to sewage?
Yes, and so I like your reference there to Victorian waste, because I'm a Londoner originally, and I started my sort of connection with the beach and beach cleaning, mudlarking on the banks of the Thames with my dad, where I'd go and look for old clay pipes along the Thames, and obviously a much more an inert form of litter made out of clay, so relatively harmless compared to the plastics we see today. So London is very close to my heart, and the super sewer is a way of stopping the huge number of combined sewer overflow discharges that there were or there are in the Thames. The work we're doing at the moment specifically relates to combined sewer overflows, and there are too many across all of our rivers and around our coastline. I surf at beaches where there are 2 or 3 of them. Sometimes we're seeing some beaches with many tens of spills during the year, which we don't feel is acceptable. So investment needs to happen, and we're bringing some politicians and some health experts and some people who have become sick from using the sea together in Westminster. It's actually the week after next, on the 23rd of May, to talk about the limits on sewer overflows. The number of times they're legally allowed to discharge. I don't think we're going to move to a position when we've got absolutely never a drop of sewage going into the sea, but we want to see almost the equivalent of that. So it's only in the most extreme circumstances, when the system is fit for bursting, that sewage can be released into the sea. So we're calling for an absolute maximum of 3 per season within that. But it's a difficult debate. Ultimately, in the UK, or in England certainly, we want to separate out the sewage system from the runoff of our streets and cities. But we're talking about billions of pounds worth of investment to do that. And it's not like we're in the position to do that at the moment, unfortunately. And I don't think it would be the right way to campaign fully around that, because actually the reality of achieving that result and that goal is low.
Thank you. Is there another question here? Yes, there's a question. None on your side yet, Margaret. We'll get one.
Hi, Hugo.
Hey,
Andy Hughes, artist and advocate. In the 80s, we were the data man of Europe. I suppose we're all familiar with that phrase. And obviously, in the 90s and the last 30 years, we've seen a lot of changes. And do you think that if the country decides to remove itself from the European framework, that we might return to the data man? Do you think that title might come back?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I said, it's the 23rd of June is a huge decision for the country, and I think one of the biggest concerns, and I wrote about it or touched on it in our latest edition of Pipeline magazine, is the void of information that there is if we do come out. What will replace the environmental legislation that we currently benefit from Brussels. So yes, and I'm concerned in the debate and in people's decision-making process that they don't have enough evidence to make the right informed decision. And it will come down to just some, probably not environmental, but some other issues, mainly relating to jobs and the economy and, unfortunately, immigration. And those are the things that will drive decisions at the ballot box. But the environment has undoubtedly benefited massively from European legislation, and it's without a doubt that Surfers Against Sewage could not have achieved what it achieved without pressing on those pieces of legislation. It took the sort of combination of the bureaucrats in Brussels and the legislators and the politicians doing their work, and Surfers Against Sewage coming up with other organisations to talk about the status quo and the unacceptable nature of that at the front line. So yeah, it would concern me if we took any backward steps in that respect. And we've got opportunities. So it's not just what has happened, but what will happen with the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. And probably more excitingly and more importantly, the Circular Economy Directive, because that's where we'll design litter out and waste out of the system. That's where we'll trap plastic in the economy as opposed to the environment. And that's where we can create real change. So, it'd be a shame that we wouldn't have a voice in that in the decision-making processes.
Thank you. Back to Exeter. Is there a further Exeter question? There may not be. I'll come back one more time, I'm sure. Okay, well, look, what I'm going to do then, can I just ask you a question? Oh, is there one? Sorry, is that? No, I heard some noise. Can I just ask you a question? We do a lot of lobbying, in a slightly different way, but the lobbying is a core part of what the university does. What do you feel the most productive avenues you've got are to influence politicians? Is it the direct, the all-party group, by the way, that sounds a very good membership for a small group, for a new group. But what works, bluntly? Is it the personal? Is it the pressure of your members and supporters? It certainly probably isn't just the evidence. Do you see what I mean?
I don't think there's any sort of one-size-fits-all necessarily. It depends. What I think is really powerful is that we represent a lot of people who really do care passionately about their backyard. That communities around the beach environment really are sort of powerful and connected with each other. And I think that their local MP listens to them, or the MPs that we have on the all-party parliamentary group, really are respectful of the power of that community, and see they're their constituents, they're the electorate, and they can vote them in or out. And so I think that there's a powerful connection and combination there that we use. So it's without a doubt that we couldn't do what we do, in Parliament and have the discussions we have without having all of the great volunteers that we've had at beach cleans, the people who come along to actions, who sign our petitions. I don't think that we couldn't just do it taking an opinion on what we do. We would be sort of, powerless, really. So it's really important that we connect the community with the politicians. And we seem to be climbing up the ladder. In a way, we've gone from, maybe outside of the table to being around the table. And so it's great that actually we can get ministers along to our all-party parliamentary groups, that we're invited by ministers to inform the government where we can. And that's not playing just nicely, that's actually talking about the real changes we want to see. So it's not just having a nice chat and a cup of coffee, it's about really calling for the powerful changes we'd like.
Thank you. Just checking there isn't a last question here. Yes, there is. There's two. See, there's two questions. One at the back and one on this side. So we'll take the one at the back and then I'll come down to the one on the side.
Hi, Hugo. I'm Ian Ashton, University of Exeter. I was just wondering, as far as your monitoring for the sewage overflows at the beach, it seems to me that, especially in the southwest, beaches are, like, as you've touched on, a local amenity, much like a playground or something, that is being soiled with sewage. For a politician, helping to clean that up, or even helping the monitoring to be extended, is surely a positive thing, a big win for them amongst the community. So is there any political opposition to improved monitoring or better regulation? And if so, how is that a position that's sort of being held?
You're very right that it should just be a positive thing to align with the call for the prevention of any sewage going into any beach. However, I think there's a funny sort of balance with that has been around since the very early days, that I'm sure Andy Hughes would sort of agree with, that actually sometimes politicians talking about the issue too much can also turn off the community at certain times, because they don't want their beaches condemned either, as somewhere people shouldn't go, because obviously, particularly sort of rural coastal communities are quite fragile in terms of their economies, so they don't want to put any tourists off. And there's this sort of Jaws shark sort of theory that if you talk about the shark, people won't come, but you do need to talk about the shark to stop the shark, as it were. Not that we'd advocate killing any sharks. But yes, I mean, we're on a journey again. We're talking to politicians through the all-party parliamentary group about stopping sewage discharges through combined sewer overflows, or limiting them to the very maximum effect. They are interested, they do care. Clearly, it's not the biggest all-party parliamentary group, but it's fairly big for an organisation of our size. So politicians are interested in listening to what we're saying. I believe that more change can happen to protect our beaches on that front.
There's a question down here, halfway down.
Hi, I'm Beth. I'm a student at the European Centre for Environment and Human Health. I firstly want to say, as a sort of online follower of SAS, I'm impressed that it's only 11 of you. And my question kind of relates to that. You obviously have this huge online following, and I'm wondering what are your thoughts on what's kind of key from turning people from being passive supporters, which I probably class myself as at the moment, to being active supporters and taking them from following and liking things on social media to actually getting them out and making change.
It's a really good question, and if I actually knew the answer, I'd be a very rich man. It's something we try to do all of the time. You know, it's without that, it's a very important part of our communication. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we reach a lot of people. But converting them into active volunteers, into donors, into regular supporters is much, much more challenging. And we're talking normally fractions of a % that you actually convert into real action. But it's something we're always trying new techniques for. So with something like our Sewage Free Seas call that we're running at the moment, Instagram and Twitter have been very effective. We evolve with it to create films, create different ways of engaging, create different ways to bring people across onto our website. So yeah, it's a challenge, but one that we're always working at. The social media space is both brilliant and an absolute nightmare to sort of work with, because it's so hungry for content. It's so hungry for us to work to its terms, and actually sometimes it isn't always the most effective route. Sometimes actually just getting people to write letters, just a few letters to an MP can be more sort of effective in creating engagement than getting thousands of likes on a post for something.
I'm going to turn to our vote of thanks in a second, but I just want to make sure there isn't one person with a... Yes, there is. Margaret, you've got a question for your microphone.
Thanks. I'm Rebecca. I study at University of Exeter's Centre for Ecology and Conservation. You've mentioned a few times now the referendum on the 23rd of June, and I was just wondering what are you going to do for that? Can the SAS actively campaign their kind of stance on it, or can you not?
We can actively campaign if we wanted to actively campaign. We're going to be publishing a series of articles about the importance of environmental legislation coming out of Europe, and particularly the legislation that we've used to create the change, or create the change that we've seen and that we will moving forward. We've been bombarded. I tell you, I probably field 2 or 3 media calls a day about, will you come along to our photo shoot? We'd like you in your wetsuits with your surfboards, championing our thing here or there. And as a small organisation, we don't actually have a lot of money, time or resources. And what we have to focus our attentions on is running the programmes that we're there to run. So our marine litter initiatives, our sewage initiatives, and various other active campaigns that the team are already working really hard at. So I'm really mindful of protecting my team to make sure that they can get on with the work that they're paid to do, that our members want to see them do, that our trustees need them to do to create what we need to create as a charity. I think we're making a strong statement by publishing information around the important legislation, but what we don't want to do is have a huge drain of resources by being pulled on to the active campaign trail for the referendum, which, as you've seen, is quite a sort of circus. And we're calling actually for much more information about what will replace the legislation if we exit Europe.
That's great, thank you.
Sorry, go on. Was just a follow on. Can I get a mic to you? Sorry, for the Exeter team.
It's a little bit mischievous, but you did mention Boris. Have you got the chair of your all-party parliamentary group on message about that?
On message about what I've just outlined, we have actually. We put together a briefing note for all of the members of the all-party parliamentary group, highlighting the great benefits we've seen here in the UK from European legislation, but also making sure that as an all-party parliamentary group, that if there is Brexit, that they work with us to make sure we've got the strongest possible, as strong or stronger than the current legislation that we have to protect our blue spaces. So we're sort of ahead of the curve on that one. We want to make sure that we plan for any eventuality. basically, which is important. And certainly we've got to be careful not to get drawn too far into it. And we certainly didn't go out and sort of picket the Vote Leave bus as Boris sped through Truro.
I noticed, by the way, that the Vote Leave bus was made in Germany, which you can't make up. I'm gonna say something. I hope you'll forgive me for saying it, but it builds on what you're saying. I don't want to steal your thunder, but just to say the obvious point, we are very worried at the university about the result. It's the only issue ever that the entire section of vice-chancellors, every vice-chancellor has signed up, whatever their own views as citizens, that leaving would be a mistake. There's an opinion poll coming out in 2 days' time, I think. I just got the email just as you were starting to speak, saying that 50% of young people don't even know when the date is. And the big shock is young people are overwhelmingly in favour of staying in, but they're not likely to vote. And so we are doing a lot to make sure that people vote. And we've got a debate next Friday night on the 20th down here in Cornwall. We've got one in Exeter for the Exeter team on the 24th, where we are bringing people together to debate the merits of staying in or leaving. And I'm speaking on both, and I'm rather definitely a stayer-inner, just to be completely clear. But there are other valid views that I'm sure we will hear. Look, that was fantastically interesting and great questions, but I'm going to turn to Deputy Vice-Chancellor Mark Goodwin, who's going to offer a quick vote of thanks.
I'm Mark Goodwin, Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Innovation and External Engagement at the University, and also responsible for our activities at our Cornwall campuses. Firstly, can I thank you? Can I thank the audiences, both here in Truro and in Exeter, for attending tonight's lecture, which, as Steve said, is the first in a Diamond Jubilee series of lectures that will be addressing some of the major public issues that are currently shaping all of our lives. Secondly, of course, a huge thanks to Hugo for such a passionate, interesting and informed talk on what is clearly a matter of huge importance. It's a matter of huge importance to us as individuals, particularly as you've seen from the audience response to those of us who happen to be privileged enough to live and work by the sea. It's also a matter of huge importance to the university, where we have truly world-class research teams exploring the conservation and protection of the marine environment. So it's a subject very dear to our heart as an institution. And I think, as Hugo pointed out very clearly, it's a matter of great importance to society more generally. But despite its intrinsic importance, I think, as Hugo also showed very clearly, we can't take marine protection for granted. And indeed, it's something that has to be continuously fought for, and it's something that has to be continuously campaigned for. And I thought the lecture showed very clearly how those campaigns have evolved since the 1990s, how they've evolved in line with particular issues of the day, but also how they've evolved always with surfers against sewage at their forefront. And it's very interesting to hear that perhaps you're moving on to campaigns about the circular economy, because our business school is just about to establish a major research group on the circular economy, so we may well be able to help you and join forces with you on that area as well. So in closing, thank you for being such an engaged audience. Thank you for a hugely stimulating set of questions, both here and in Exeter. For those of you here, we have a drinks reception outside. I'm very sorry that we don't have anything lined up in Exeter. We'll just have to imagine what we're drinking down here. But above all, I hope you've enjoyed this evening's lecture as much as I have. So please join me in thanking Hugo for a thought-provoking evening. Thank you.